Yeah, there's a lot of emotion to draw on, shall we say. And they were just great. They just always encouraged. They liked what I did.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. I quite often talk in the introductions to these shows about what a privilege and honour it is to speak with guests, and it is every single time. And it certainly is the case with this episode's guest, Mr. Kerry Minnear. Kerry has popped up across the last 5 years of the show nearly. Can't believe it's been nearly 5 years. As an inspiration or influence to a whole range of people. So we were thrilled when we received the opportunity recently to speak to Kerry. And as you'll hear, we'll talk about the amazing remaster of Gentle Giant's live album, but also we cover Kerry's career in a much broader sense, his approach to composition, his approach to playing, his post-Gentle Giant career, the importance of humility in music, you name it, we cover it, and just what an absolute gentleman and master of his craft Kerry is. So there's never a better time for me to be quiet and for you to jump in and have a listen, and I'll talk to you after the show. Kerry, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time with us on this lovely weekend. Well, I assume it's a lovely weekend for you there in the UK.
It's really good. It's really nice and hot and warm, and I'm wearing a pullover because it's not really hot and warm at all.
I was about to say, hot in the UK can be 15 degrees. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're all wallowing in it.
No, it's absolutely lovely to have you on the show. I thought we'd start off because one of the reasons we have the privilege of speaking with you is I know that there's an imminent release in May of a remaster of your amazing live album, Playing the Fool, the complete live experience. So I thought I'd just start off with asking about what was the momentum for that being remastered, firstly, and then I'd like to get into what your recollections of doing that album originally was.
Blimey, that's a long time ago. Yeah, well, the reason for doing it is we've done most of the rest of the catalogue, courtesy of our friend Stephen Wilson, who's helped us out a lot. And this one was a different kettle of fish because some of the masters that we need to do the remixing were missing. So also we discovered we were actually using a mobile studio unit that was outside. It belonged to Jethro Tull. It was called Maison Rouge. And I think he did a lot of stuff for people around about then. So we actually recorded 4 concerts, one of which was pretty disastrous because the keyboard was packed up. So we really had 3 concerts to choose from. And so he, when we started to listen back to them, the speeds were varying. So in other words, the capstan wasn't constant. So it did produce some problems. And so we realized there were going to be so many problems with this that we couldn't just send it to Stephen Wilson and said, remix this, because it was going to be hours of trying to sort things out before he could start. So we have a very good friend, a highly technical able chap called Dan Bournemark, who actually mixed the whole thing. But first of all, he had to correct everything, take the hums out, take all the broken leads, apparently. He's worth an interview himself, by the way, if ever you fancy finding out a bit more. The things he had to do to sort things. But he finished up with a slightly different objective too. Rather than just remixing the tracks as they were on the original album, he said, I would like to make this like a concert. So that is the whole concept, is that you're there at an hour and a quarter or so concert, listening to the band, listening to the heckling from behind. If you're listening in Atmos, which we had the privilege of doing, it's amazing. It's like you're there, and he's chosen some great live tracks. So they're not all sincerely a remix of the original, but they are a complete concert of genuine live performance, which for me was obviously a lot more exciting in many ways because they're versions that we hadn't heard. And, so it's turned out to be something that is very special, especially to me. When I first heard it, I actually welled up because I haven't been part of something that kind of creative and strong and confident and throwaway since those days. Everything else I've been part of has been an effort. And, it's just lovely to hear what sounds like like water off a duck's back. We're just throwing it out. And it's been mixed with such care by Dan because he does love the band. I try and tell him not to be so obsessed, but I can't. I can't stop him.
I don't think Dan's alone there, Kerry. And I'm fascinated when you said you welled up, because I can imagine if you're hearing all that wider sound stuff from around the show, as you said, the banter, the heckling, all that sort of stuff, it's essentially a time capsule where you won't have heard that stuff for, well over 40 years. Yeah, was it a real head-spinning experience for you listening to all that?
Yes. Yeah, it was really. Yeah. It's because, you have to edit these bits out while I have a think. It's because it meant a lot it's been weird because I've done so many things since I left the band that because of the interest in the band, that has taken a place in my memory that is closer than the stuff that I've done since the band. You get what I mean? And it's quite weird because it seems like almost yesterday.
I absolutely
sometimes. Do. Yeah.
Yes.
I finished up with just being overwhelmed really by the privilege of what it all was. And I still can't believe that there's a continued interest. And people, just still coming, youngsters that are getting into the band, and the internet has done us such a favour in so many ways.
We're going to explore that a little bit more, Kerry, as well, about how revered Gentle Giant is and your work is up until this day, because it is something. And just as an aside, there are a number of guests, both on the record and off the record, that have mentioned you personally. Whether it's Richard Hilton from Nile Rodgers and Chic to the current keyboard player in Kansas, both of them cited you in their interviews as huge influences and inspirations. So I'm not surprised, but I can imagine when you're at the centre of it, it can feel quite surprising.
Well, yeah, because I've been a humble piano teacher, guitar teacher since then for a good 15 years. That's been very kind to me. I've managed to hold the mortgage together and stuff. And I've never thought about what I've done in the past. So people keep mentioning it to me occasionally. I did get a rap at the window when I was playing the piano one day, and it was a chap from Italy. Just I found out where you lived. I've come to say hello. It's all a bit weird. Yeah, because I'm just, I'm just happy.
That is a bit, I'd argue, Kerry, that is weird.
Yeah, I don't know how he got hold of the address, but no, I know there's several people that I know and admire that are friends now. You've mentioned one from Chic there, my good friend, and there's the Dream Theatre chap who's the keyboard player with Dream Theatre.
Jordan Rudess, yep.
That's him. Yeah, he's a great player, and all these, kind of very, very, very confident players that seem to be I'm somehow impressed by what we did. I think it's more about, because I'm not a great exponent of keys, I don't think, but I think with all the band, perhaps we're not the best, We're not brilliant exponents on our instruments, but what we did was good feel, and the parts were all very interesting, and the character of the individual players was very much represented. They weren't just playing the parts, each with the bluesiness of Gary's playing, funkiness of the drums from John, and all the different things that have been put into us all as individuals were all coming out through the character of the band and the individual players. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't call myself a great player by any means, but I think I'm quite creative and quite interesting. So QI, quite interesting, I call it.
That's right. No, you
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
are, and that's an understatement. So I'm interested, Kerry, to take a little bit of a step back. We always ask our guests about their musical upbringing, and I'm particularly interested to explore with you what in your musical upbringing and original education in music has probably stood you in good stead right up until today. But just tell us a little bit about your childhood, teenage years, and what made you passionate about music.
yeah. Well, when I was 11, I went to a secondary school that was just about to lose the timpanist from the school orchestra. So as an 11-year-old, I became the timpanist, and that's before the days of pedal tuning. So I was having to tune with little handles around, and quite often I had to tune to a different note to the key that the orchestra, because I got an entry coming later in a different key. So my relative pitch got quite good at that point as I tried to do all that. And that was one of the big training for the year. I've never got perfect pitch, but relative pitch is pretty good because of that. So I was pleased with that. And I enjoyed tips, because it also meant I could sit at the back of an orchestra for ages before my big entry and just listen to how everything was put together. It was very instructive in many ways. And then, of course, I came in the wrong place, and uh, there you go. But it's I've enjoyed that element. I've played in orchestras and enjoyed that. And of course, at school, I was in a band, formed a band for street cred, and that's it. Just when the Rolling Stones were becoming popular, so we were doing Beatles and Stones, and I was just enjoying. Really, I started off on drums on the kit, and then the chords got a bit complicated for our guitarist, so I went to guitar, and all the time I was taking lessons, reluctantly, but my parents were very good disciplinarians and they kept me at it. And I'm very glad that they did. So, yeah, I kept playing, and eventually, I managed to get into, the Royal Academy of Music after school, thanks to a very positive headmaster who phoned up and arranged for me to have an audition. So, and that was 3 years of wonderful instruction, walking amongst the corridors, listening to people practicing, thinking, "Flippin' heck, what am I doing here?" But, it was great. It was a wonderful experience. And that was a study in composition. So I went there to be percussion first study, but I took some compositions as a backup to get me in on the percussion. But they took the compositions off and said, "We think you should do composition first and percussion and piano joint second study." So that's what I did for 3 years there. And it's lovely. I mean, I'm full of insecurities, like most musicians. Had quite a nervous time there, but it was a wonderful experience looking back at it. So I enjoyed it. It's a good study. I
And
studied
just
music.
and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was going to say, and just on the Royal Academy of Music, as you just mentioned, you studied composition and so on. What were the key? I know it's very hard to sort of summarize what you would learn across 3 years, but what were the core things that you learned that stood you in good stead throughout your career, and helped you at least address some of those insecurities to feel confident to actually go ahead with music?
Right. So what I found interesting was my study was composition throughout the years. So from Palestrina, early Renaissance music, right through to current, in the classical vein. Nothing pop. There wasn't pop and jazz in those days at the Academy. I'm sure there is now. Um, but so I was studying what was uncomfortable for people at different points of musical development. So, for instance, Palestrina, the interval of a fourth had to be prepared from a previous chord. If you just played a fourth, it would be painful, a bit like an aggressive semitone today. And I find it quite fun to get my head around what was happening in people's receptivity as we went through the years. And the rest of it was mainly learning about counterpoint, which is another great interest of mine. Just not playing chords, but allowing the parts to create the harmony by the way they flow together. And that was the real interest for me. And I think it came through in some of the giant stuff. That we had. We weren't playing chords so much as playing individual parts. And I've always enjoyed that because it's hard for the ear to follow what's happening. And yet you find it agreeable. That's quite nice. Listening to Bach is quite overwhelming sometimes. You just see all this stuff going on and, how do you do that? And then it touches something as well as an added bonus. So, yeah, so I think it was, counterpoint. What was painful to people at different points and why, and how I never really got into contemporary classical. That was one thing that, I just couldn't, it always seems to be about angst and neurosis of some sort. The older I get to, the more pastoral I need comfort. So I enjoy harmony rather than aggressive stuff. But, it all depends on the mood, doesn't it? I'm sure you enjoy listening to lots of different
It does.
stuff.
And so we're definitely going to come back and talk about Counterpoint and the work with Gentle Giant for sure. I've got that on my list of questions. But let's talk about how you moved from the Royal Academy of Music into actually making a living out of music, including, the formation of Gentle Giant. So very keen to hear about that phase.
Well, it was pretty miraculous, I'll tell you. I had a friend. I come from a tiny village in Dorset, and I had a friend who was living in Portsmouth, which is where the band Simon Dupree and the Big Sound were from. And he was calling to pick up his friend who was living with one of the band. He was living for extra money. Phil Shulman used to have a student staying with him, and he was calling to go to the pub with his friend, overheard them talking about reforming the band to do something more adventurous musically, and said, well, I know a chap who's just done a degree in composition at the Royal Academy. Would you be interested in his details? So I get a call out of the blue from Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, who I hadn't heard of at that point. It was a bit embarrassing. But they came to chat to me and invited me down. So the whole thing was a total miracle, because if he hadn't been calling for his friend and hadn't overheard the conversation, decided to put my name forward, none of it would have happened for me. So I don't know. I don't know what Gentle Giant would have been, but I went down for the audition over a pub, and the rest is kind of history, really. But I do see that as God's hand on my life, because it was such a miracle, that little connection. And I had such a great time in Giant. It was such a privilege to be part of, and they drew stuff out of me. The very fact that I've not done a lot since I left the band is proof of the fact that, I needed that environment of sometimes tense, because the brothers didn't always get on really well, but that was stimulating in some ways. At least I didn't fall asleep when we had group meetings, it was, so yeah, there's a lot of emotion to draw on, shall we say. And they were just great. They just always encouraged. They liked what I did. And that's very important. I need people around me who are saying, that's nice, Care. Do that again, or develop that. I can't do that on my own. I just think it's all, that's all right, I suppose. So yeah, it was a perfect environment for whatever gift was in me to be brought out. So, and I'm very blessed by that, looking back on it.
And Kerry, do you remember if at that audition, what do you remember what you played or what you did that obviously led to you successfully joining the band?
Yeah. Well, I remember I was confronted by instruments I'd never seen before, like a mellotron and a Hammond organ. And so I was shot away with the equipment to start off with. I'd gone down with a friend who was a guitarist as well, because there were two posts on offer. But the guitarist didn't quite fit in. So, he didn't join the band in the end. But, we just played a few things together and improvised a bit. And I think probably just from what we were able to produce, was enough to show them that, I was listening to what they were doing and I could fit in, and technically I was able. And, so yeah, I think it must, but then we had to go for a pint because we were above a pub. So we went down for a pint, the two of us who'd gone for the interview, while they had a chat, and, went back, and we were both offered the job at first, but then after a few weeks, the guitarist, decided that he didn't quite fit. So we had another job then to find Gary, and later on we had another job to find drummers, and they were all fun. It's an interesting point what you make. What happened to make the, because you can make some terrible decisions if you're not careful trying to pick somebody. You don't know much about their personality. You're just listening to how they play. And, it's always a tricky moment, isn't it? In any band, I think, trying to find a new member.
That's right.
It was a no-brainer for me because we were on a retainer. So, because of what they'd achieved in Simon Dupree, they were being paid weekly. So it was more or less the national average in terms of income. And, if I turned it down, that would be absolutely absurd. So I was over the moon.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely fascinating. As you know, retainers still happen nowadays, but they're more of a rarity than a commonality. So
Yeah.
I think, it is a no-brainer. I think
Absolutely.
to a large extent.
Yeah.
And Kerry, I'm fascinated, obviously, now that you're in the band, and then the sort of period in the lead up to recording that amazing first album. So how did you gel? You've just mentioned that auditioning people is interesting, and it's not just about the way they play, but their personalities and so on. How did you gel so well in the lead up to recording that amazing first album?
Yeah, the first album was basically our live act. So, we were just, playing what we practiced in order to produce a concert. And we had Tony Visconti, of course, as our lovely guy who was just right for us at that time. He did the first two albums. I think we all enjoyed it. He enjoyed it, I think. He's made reference to it in some of his interviews, I think, as being something that he felt was a good thing to do at that point. Of course, for me, being in the studio was phenomenal experience, bumping into Elton John, who used to be in Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. I don't know if you knew that. Simon Dupree and the Big Sound had an organist who was poorly. And so this chap, Reg White, filled the gap for a while. And then, of course, their keyboard player got better. So he had to remove himself and go forth and make a career as Elton John, bless his heart. So we bumped into people in the studios gelling in the studio. I think we all knew we were just having fun, really. It was wonderful. And Tony was so good with us. We enjoyed the studio work very much. There was a lot of experimentation always when we recorded. I quite often sit and improvise over tracks that were already recorded, and they keep bits of it. And so lots of things were added at the last minute and so on. So,
yeah. And this is probably my first semi-technical question, Kerry. So do you recall, and it doesn't have to be just that first album, but what were the instruments you were very familiar with and working with from a keyboard viewpoint at that stage? So, I mean, you've mentioned the Hammond, you've mentioned the Mellotron. Just what were those key instruments on that first album in particular?
Yeah. Well, those were the first two band instruments that were new to me. I brought with me vibraphone, which was another contribution that I had, and I played a bit of guitar and bass. But keyboard wise, I suppose playing a proper grand piano with properly mic'd up and so on was a new experience for me. And then I think it was Acquiring the Taste, the second album, when I met the Moog for the first time, when you had a wall of wires and a man to operate it all. And you said, can you do me a sound like an oboe? And you find one. And so that was my introduction to that. So at the time of the first album, it was mainly just those two, really, the organ, the piano. I don't remember when I got the Wurlitzer. I used Wurlitzer electric piano a lot. I like the warmth of it when you're working late at night. I used to turn the vibrato up and just listen to the and it kind of soothing somehow. I like the old whirly, but the reeds kept breaking. I could always tell when it went a little bit flat. I knew that next gig I'll hit it too hard and it'll be gone. So I try and order one. So the Wurlitzer was great, and the clavinet came along. That was my stock. In front of me was clavinet on top, Wurlitzer, and then a Hammond of some sort underneath. And then on my right, I finished up with a mini Moog on top of whatever electric. I might have a Fender Rhodes, and some other weird things. But I think as a keyboard player, I think I'm a bit disappointing because I never got into the technical side of noise production, and I felt our stuff could have been a bit more impressive if I've always played things in octaves. I like lunging. This was a big thing. I'm a lunger. And so I would just play something on a different keyboard some nights, for the sake of it, and or double up or something. But nowadays you just have to have everything in place and have the right sound available. But of course, the kinds of sounds you've got are huge compared to what I had back then.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I do want to ask you about the clavinet, though, Kerry, and I hope you find this amusing. On a comment on one of the videos of another interview you did a few years back, someone said in regards to you and your clavinet that you're a crazed combination of Stevie Wonder and Bella Bartok. What do you say to that?
I find that quite complimentary. I would agree.
As you should.
It seemed to serve everything that was coming out of me. So if I felt rhythmically, something just suddenly spontaneously would come, it was so percussive that it was right on the front of what I was feeling. So, it just brought it out of you. It's all about bringing out what's inside. I find I find it really hard to play on instruments that don't respond properly or whatever. I've struggled with computer music really because I just love live instruments and the way all the sound comes from everywhere from a real piano rather than two speakers. It's so yeah. The clavinet definitely suited so many things that were coming out of me, and leaves a lot of gaps, which is nice. You play the note and there's a gap, and it. I like gaps. They're good.
That's probably a perfect segue, Kerry. You mentioned during your training the importance of counterpoint to you, and obviously Gentle Giant is renowned for that as well. So I'm particularly interested in the recording of your albums and also live as well, how you collaborated to ensure those amazing, not just pieces of counterpoint, but huge, sections of counterpoint. How did you work that up so effectively?
So the good thing about counterpoint is that if you're playing the notes right and you're in time, it should work. So, it's important that the balance is good so that every part is heard. And that's obviously the job of whoever's, in charge of our sound. But I think as long as the parts work, it's quite fun putting them on different instruments, and as long as they don't go out of range, it should work. So there's a security in it, funnily enough. Once you know your part, it's quite magical how it all comes together. I do love it. I ought to write more of it, but it's hard work. So I tend not to do it so much these days. There's a lot of experimentation, I find, in making it actually work perfectly. Much easier to play a chord and improvise over the top.
It is,
Yeah.
no, indeed. And I'm also interested, did you have very strong influences in those earlier days of Gentle Giant in particular, as far as specific composers or styles that really did have a heavy influence on you?
Yeah, at the same time as joining the band, I got into early music, Renaissance music and stuff. So that's when I was I was very blessed by the work of the chap called David Monroe, who was discovering all those early instruments, the crumhorns and rebecs and all the weird, wonderful things. And the complexity of the rhythm of Renaissance music is, classical music really smoothed everything out with its arpeggios and scales and even runs. The earlier stuff is far more interesting rhythmically. And so that was a great influence, although I don't think lovely Ray, who used to do the other half of the writing for the band, he didn't enjoy my medieval stuff as much as some of the fans did. He was more of a Bartok man. He liked to stretch things, and he was more angsty. But yeah, I enjoyed the early music, so that was quite a heavy influence in me at the time. But the band as a whole tended not to listen to other music very much. We were quite insular. Um, we were living in Portsmouth, not in London, and because of our schedule, we tended to be quite head down. Let's get on. So I can't say that we were influenced, or I didn't feel any influence from other bands particularly. So I was really drawing on what I'd heard at the Academy, and the things and the early music. Yeah, I remember on the first album in the track Giant, there were some Palestrina type vocals going on and drawing on what I'd learnt. So we're all thieves, really, aren't we? But there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I love that answer, Kerry. That's amazing. And I mean, it's one of the testaments to Gentle Giant's longevity is that ability to balance those classical influences with rock elements and a whole bunch of other stuff. I do have to ask you, and we've got a valued listener, Matt, who particularly asked me to ask you about how you did balance those medieval influences with what was going on during the 1970s, which, as you know, was an amazing time for music. How did it feel at the time trying to find that balance?
What, of introducing early music into that? Yeah, I think there were quite a few bands doing it at the time. Um, Lindisfarne, is it? I'm trying to think of some of the names. Griffith, was it? Like, I can't remember. But there's a lot of bands that were, and folk as well, of course, which draws on the modal influences of early music as well. But I did find the early stuff particularly interesting because of the weirdness of the harmonies. And I think the 70s were just a gift to for a band like ours, because you could do we didn't feel any restriction. The only restrictions we felt were later on when we thought, we could do with a bit more success. And that was when we began to lose our creative edge, I think. But in the early days, we really could draw on anything. And what I really, hats off to the lads in the band, that they would take it on, and they all enjoyed it. I mean, Gary, out blues player, playing a recorder like a traveling troubadour, and it's just, and Derek with his gutsy voice, singing falsetto-y stuff. It was we just all embraced whatever came along and enjoyed it. And that's quite something really. I think, because
Yes.
normally there's somebody who says, I don't want to do this. I want to be in a different band now. But
That's right.
it never happened for us. So that was good.
Yeah, no, that's one hell of a testament to you, yeah, the chemistry that made up Gentle Giant. And I do need to ask, I know you supported Black Sabbath at one stage. I'd love your recollections because I could not think of two more different types of bands. What
No,
are your recollections of that occasion?
well, it was great, really. Looking back, it was great. What an opportunity. Our first gig on the West Coast was the Hollywood Bowl. And, we just, although it was a complete mismatch, as you say, it made an impression. So we were able to go back to the West Coast and sold out the Whiskey A Go Go, I think it's called, about 3 nights on the trot on the back of what we thought was a complete waste of time, where people threw firecrackers at us on stage and all kinds of horrific words came from some of our mouths. And, it's all been, you can't knock it. It's better to be seen by lots of people somewhere than just a few nerdy people. There's something about, and they had their own problems at that time. So some of the gigs were cancelled. So we were racking up some debt because we were all in hotels and weren't playing the gigs. But having said all that, I mean, I've got more time for them now. My daughter went to college with Tony Iommi's daughter
Wow.
because he's a local man. They're all local to me here now in the Midlands. So, I've never met them, but, I had a drink with Ozzy in a pub not in a bar in the States. I got quite depressed talking to him. It was quite a depressing conversation. But hats off, they've done so well with what they give. It's wonderful, really. I,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, it was a mismatch, but I think, it gave us a great start that was worthy of mention, really. Yeah.
Yes. And that's probably a nice segue, Kerry, into the live experience. So, once you've recorded an album, or in your case, more than 10 albums, what was the logistical exercise of doing a tour and recreating that music live? How much rehearsal did you need to do, and how did you approach a tour as a general sort of concept?
Well, the Shulman brothers were, but after the Simon Dupree, I think, really were very stage conscious of how to engage and give yourself to an audience. And indeed, during our times of support, we were often left with about 6 inches at the front of the stage, half the PA, half the lights, and we would have to give ourselves to the audience. It was all about, you know, really throwing yourself into the performance, putting everything into it and communicating with the audience. And I think that was all a leftover from them, that they used to do with Simon Dupree. So I think we've always been more exciting live than, because when we recorded our albums, quite often the material was very fresh to us. So we hadn't perhaps added as much character as we would eventually. So this is why, again, playing the full is such a valid release, because that was it. That's us at our best, really, when we're, really rocking, really, really know what's coming next. Whereas so often in the studio, you could hear drummer didn't quite know what was happening at that point. But these are lovely little gems now. They're not faults. So it's, I think the live performance, the fact that we gave ourselves to it, we would rearrange them too. So we'd link them and we'd create some things that would make them, and Freehand, which is one of our more known tracks, on the album was totally written by me. But the live version with all that exciting semi-quaver movement that goes on, powers on, was way. You thought, we don't want to go into a 3/4 thing in a live situation. And you wrote that fantastic culmination of that track. So yeah, I think it was their gifting of knowing what an audience would want. And Ray and Derek and Phil, when he was with us, were very conscious of that. So yeah, and we simplified things too. We thought rather than try and replicate the album perfectly, we'll simplify something so we can, have we can jump to something else. Or so it was more important to be relaxed and give than to be all, head down and making it perfect like the album. Which yeah, I think it worked. Hopefully, people will let us
Yeah,
know, won't they?
it absolutely. That's right. Well, that segues nicely, Kerry, to a question I had was, what sort of response were you getting from the audience? Because there's the stereotype of progressive type music that you've got people, sitting back, massaging their beard, just taking it all in and admiring it. But were you getting more visceral reactions than that, or a little bit of a combination?
Well, it varied so much, David. Like any tour, there's going to be gigs that seem to have them completely on your side. Other gigs where you wonder if there's anybody there. Um, I can remember getting very frustrated on the road because I used to get a little bit depressed. Partly because I was out of my domestic situation. I'm not a very brave person, but I can remember that sometimes, especially some things like the vibe solo or anything where we wanted to drop the level, and the level of sound in the audience would be so loud that you didn't. There's no point really. I can remember gigs like that, and other gigs where you could hear a pin drop, and it just used to vary so much. And I've no idea why. It could only be, you might have only traveled 100 miles, but you find a completely different group of people. But yeah, there are times when I think the prog rock type people that tend to listen rather than explode with enthusiasm. There's a few of them around as well. So you learn to live with it all, don't you? I guess. Do you?
That's right. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
think it's a great answer. No, I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned that about the trials and tribulations of touring. As you know, touring is very, very hard. How did you keep as much as you could your chin up and keep motivated across, what might have been a longer tour?
We all had a professional view of it. I think we were very good. Towards most of our touring life, we were 5-piece rather than 6. So that meant 2 double rooms and a single. And we used just to spread the single round, although Gary and John used to share most of the time, seemed to suit them. And it was quite right. And, so I think we just used to, know that we had to get through this. We had to stay on good terms with each other every day. And there was enough of a foundation of understanding, I think, of who we all were that we coped. We did cope. I struggled a
Yeah.
bit. But yeah, there were always friends as well that were on the road, especially after a few tours that you would look forward to seeing in certain towns and so on. But we weren't rock and rollers, I don't think. I mean, the nearest to rock and rollers, definitely John and Gary. They, they made a good go of it. But, I'm very middle class and, Christian upbringing. So I'm quite, I was quite reserved really. So, but I always enjoyed moving on. Funnily enough, that was the bit I enjoyed most. We're going on to another place now, and just the actual travel of going to somewhere else, somewhere perhaps we haven't been before. I enjoyed that
Yes.
aspect of it. I felt very privileged
No.
when I look back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. No, thank you. That's a great answer. And I do need to ask, what across your touring experiences, was there a time when something went spectacularly wrong that you can look back upon now and laugh about?
Well, there was a time when we couldn't get into our own gig. That was quite fun.
Ah,
We had we were the Palais de Sport in Rome, which is a big circular building, and there were about 20,000 people had come just for us. We were headlining, and we were so scruffily dressed, and there were lots of different doors to get in, and we kept going from door to door saying, "Look, we're the band, and we can't get in." So, in the end, they had to call Malcolm Mortimer, who was our drummer at the time, who was inside, and he came and identified us, and we were allowed in. But so that was quite ridiculous. I couldn't work out quite how we were going to deal with that situation, but we did. Let me think. Is there anything else that went completely wrong? Well, there was the
that's
strike. There was an air strike. We had the other place where we were quite big was the French-speaking part of Canada, and we had a gigging. I can't remember if it was Quebec when we had to get to Montreal or the other way round, but the Canadian flights were all cancelled from a strike, and we had to hire a private jet, which blew the entire income from the gig, of course. But at least we managed to make it only a few minutes late. Any other? Oh, this is where you want John and Gary. They'll remember all the fun things that went wrong.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, they are brilliant. They are both brilliant examples. I love it.
Yeah,
That's great. And I do want to talk. I do want to talk briefly, Kerry, about after Gentle Giant, because you've done some amazing stuff since then, and particularly your work on Christian music and educational projects, including the Reapers. And so, just tell us a little bit about how that developed for you, and how that perhaps was a different creative outlet for you.
yeah. I mean, it was a different world that I moved into. It was one whereby I'd felt that I wanted to express something of my spiritual leanings, if you like. I wanted to serve the God that I was coming to believe in. My wife and I had both come to that place. So I decided to help an evangelist and his group that came to our town. So there was a connection made, and I did some recording. It was all about humility, really. Just saying that whatever I've done now is not as important to me as singing a 3-chord simple worship song to the God that I love. So it was about not finding a pride in what I'd done, but acknowledging the gift and trying to produce music. And that's still really where I'm at in a way. I do love, I play at church. I belong to a church which allows me to improvise a lot. And I just like to try to find ways of touching people through just quite gentle playing while things are going on. People are talking, perhaps, and praying or whatever. So there's a sense in which the ultimate thing for me is when I sense the presence of God come because of the notes that I'm unobtrusively playing in the background, not trying to demand attention. So but touching the soul. So that's a different game than playing with notes and rhythms and, which I'm back to trying. I am back to that and I love it. But I still struggle to be happy with anything that I come up with. But my daughter is trying to help me to write at the moment. Both daughters are quite supportive and my son quite likes it too, I think. Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
So
I love that sort of, without being silly about it, it's sort of a counterpoint. So that work you've done since is a beautiful counterpoint to the Gentle Giant work as well. And then I suppose a third aspect is you even helped compose for a video game. Was that something that forced you to learn new skills, or you were just able to apply what you already knew?
that was all about Ray overstretching himself because he was doing a lot of that. and he had too many to do really. And so he said, "Would you mind doing one, Care?" So I said, "All right." I've never played a video game in my life, so I didn't know what I was up against. Every time I sent something off, I got it back saying, "It's not dark enough. It's not dark enough." So everything seemed to have too optimistic a streak in it. So he helped me though, and we got through it. And yeah, it was fun to do it. It was great to be dealing with Ray again. I always loved working with Ray, and I sometimes wish we could have got together again to do some more creative things for its own sake. But I think both of us had moved on to different types of influences and enjoyments, so it didn't quite work out in
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
No. And the other thing I would love to ask you, Kerry, is just looking back over your career, which is obviously not complete yet, but what advice would you
That's,
give to an aspiring musician who's just starting out and trying to establish themselves in the industry?
well, I know a few, so I'm trying to think what I say to them. It's not an easy one because obviously there are ways of doing it without involving the big companies. And you develop yourself online, and these are things that are beyond me. We're trying really hard. My wife Leslie and I are trying to get the old catalogue of Gentle Giant available again, because we have to send files to the right people for streaming. It's all got to be done, and we don't understand what we're doing, and we're really struggling. So if anybody out there fancies helping, we'd be so so pleased. But my advice, I suppose, is just to have that thick skin that makes you keep going and believe in what you're doing. That these are the usual cliches, I know, but they're so important to be resilient, and have some faith. But yeah, it's a difficult one because I've always been so spoiled. I've never had to involve myself in the business side of it. Um, and by the time I realized it was important, um, we'd already established ourselves because of what, the Shulman brothers had before, the support. It's always been there, the management, and it's just been an easy ride for me. I don't know how you do it when you're starting with something that's precious to you and you're trying to get it off the ground. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Really, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It is, but that's still incredibly useful advice, though, and much appreciated. Now, I'm going to ask you a nearly impossible question, Kerry, because but it's hard for any person to quantify their own impact. But as I've already mentioned, you've been an inspirational influence on so many people. So the impossible question is, what do you believe your impact on music has been?
I don't know. I suppose it is. I mean, I was trying to work out. I was trying to think what I might have to say to a question like that. I know that I enjoy what my hands come up with quite often without knowing what it is. So when Ray and I used to work on the Giant stuff, we would record ourselves because we would come up with something spontaneous. I don't know if you work like this, um, but I find that quite often I think, "Oh, that was a nice whatever I did then. What was it?" And I can't remember. So sometimes I think the fact that I wait until I see something in what I've written, or that's a bit special, and then try and develop it in a special way. There's a patience in that which can be costly, and a bit depressing at times. But you finish up with things that are a bit less obvious, and formulaic. And I suppose if I'd like to be remembered for someone who was a little bit like that just didn't do what was obvious, but nevertheless carried people where they didn't expect to go and enjoy it. I think that's how I'd like to think of my contribution. How about
Yeah,
that?
that's an amazing answer. Yeah, no, that's superb. No, I think that's a really stupendous answer. That's great. And Kerry, I do have to ask you the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. So if you had to name 5 albums that you would take to a desert island, do you know what they would be?
No, whatever I said today would probably be different tomorrow. But definitely be some choral music. I just love it.
Yep.
Choral music. I just love it. That's it.
Is there a choral piece that particularly inspires you, Kerry?
Well, yeah, there's one from an American chap called Morton Lauridsen that's called I can't think what it's called now. What is it
No,
called?
that's okay. I can look that up because I thought what we can do is we can jointly curate your desert island disc based on your inspiration. So that's enough for me to
I
put
got
forward
it.
an album.
It's
So that's fine.
O Magnum Mysterium. It's called, and it's a lovely piece of
Okay.
music. Yeah, and things like that. That just seem to carry you somewhere without trying to impress you. I don't like music that's out to impress. I like music that's out to bless you and touch you and make you realize you're a human being. There's room for it all. So I don't know, what would I take? Definitely early music, definitely some jazz, probably a little bit of jazz. I like jazz players, mainly the bebop area. I'm not too fond of when it goes a bit weird. But I like all that. Oscar Peterson's a great pianist. And what else would I take? Probably this live album of Gentle Giant to remind me of what fun we had. Probably, it's a good album.
Great. That's a great pick.
It sounds like we're having fun.
And Kerry, I know we've got to let you go in a minute, so we usually finish up with what we call our quick fire 10. So 10 short and sharp questions. The first one being, do you recall the first album you ever heard that had an impact on you, whether it was as a child or as a teenager, something that you thought, wow, this is actually something amazing?
First album. What the first albums that I would have heard? Yeah. Well, I suppose some of the classical records that my mum and dad had. There's a piece called The Danse Macabre by Saint-Saëns. So I remember being quite engaged in the excitement of that. So,
no, that's great.
Yeah. Is it? Will it do?
Yeah, no, that is good. Yeah, no, that's great. And the other short and sharp one that we have is before you play a gig, and I know you're not playing live as much, but even your church playing and so on, is there something you'd like to do before you play to make you feel settled?
Thought-wise, you mean, or playing-wise? Or both?
Either, yeah.
Yeah, no, I never feel settled. There's always there's always that risk that everything goes pear-shaped. I'm so used to things going wrong, and trying to rescue a situation rather than it being a pinnacle of human endeavor. It's part of what I do now in the circles that I work in. But I do, I just trust that there's something in me that will communicate at some point with someone in the next hour or so that I'm playing or whatever. Yeah, just hope that there's some communication. There's nothing I do, I don't think.
Great answer.
Well,
No, that's okay. No, that's great. And then if you mentioned about how lucky you were about that original audition. So we always ask, if you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been?
Well, I did do teaching. It did drive me mad, though, to be honest. The fact that kids didn't practice, and you think, well, most of the work is done between the lessons. So the frustrations of teaching were, I quite enjoy driving, but not anymore because the roads are too crowded. But I do enjoy, just, driving would have been okay. But, no, I'm glad that I'm still a musician, and, I don't know what else I'm not great at anything else, really.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, Kerry, if it's possible to pick out one, was there a favourite tour you ever did that really stands out in your memory as the best tour that you completed?
When I was in the band, we I think when we were in Italy, probably they were very. Apart from the fact that we were working for the mafia, basically, and they very often got more than one concert behind in paying us, which was very annoying after a while. But the places, seeing Italy is a lovely place. It's just the old buildings are just fantastic, and just enjoyed the whole atmosphere. I remember we had a private party we played at in Italy. For some reason, we were very successful there. I mean, after playing with Jethro Tull, which was that was a big break for us playing with Jethro. And we enjoyed the company of the band too. They were kind of English, bit nearest thing to English gentlemen that we could be with. And
Yes. And I do have to ask, Kerry, because you've mentioned Jethro Tull, obviously another iconic band. You just give us if you don't mind, a couple of minutes, just talking to us about that relationship and you touring together and so on. Because as you know, an amazing band like your own.
Well, there was a mutual respect. I think. I mean, we loved them. There weren't many bands that I'd hang around for, if we were supporting, but I often just stood around to watch from the wings. And, and I think they enjoyed our set and the character of Dean with us, really. Our first encounter with them was just after we'd finished a 2-month tour of the States. Started off with Black Sabbath and finished up with all kinds of odds and ends of people, mainly heavy rock. And just as we were about to come home, we were asked if we would support. And so how they got hold of us, I don't know, because Derek would know more because he was more au fait with what was happening in the background. We suddenly did another month with them, and that's where the relationships formed. And it was they were nice to be with, and and the audience was so good for us. So that
I could see a great overlap there. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And another nearly impossible question, Kerry, which was if you had to pick one favourite gig that you've done over your whole career, what would it be? Is there one that particularly stands out?
No. Not really.
No, that's fine. That's a legitimate answer.
No. Well, we played Anaheim Stadium to about 85,000. That was our biggest gig, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was quite impressive. And then Leslie, my wife, and I, we weren't married at that point, but we decided to walk to Disney World, because we thought there'd be pavements at the side of the roads in America. So we walked through the traffic to try to get to Disney World, and had a lovely time there as well. But no, that was the biggest gig so that was a big gig. And I remember being quite impressed by the size of it. But we were only...
Absolutely.
We were first on with 4 bands, so it's, in fact, it was the biggest one we ever did.
It's still 85,000.
Yeah,
it's still 85,000. That's amazing.
That's right, yeah. And then there were the gigs that Mum and Dad came to, of course, when we were touring England in the early days. So they were quite important to me. But apart from that, I don't know. Yeah. I'd have to think on that one.
That's great.
I'm sorry not to be more
No, that's okay. No. These are hard questions. And the other one along those lines, Kerry, is a favourite city. So is there a city that's particularly memorable to you that you've played?
Yeah, the European tours were always that much more interesting because of the character and age of them. And again, Italy I would bring into this, I think. Yeah. Rome's obviously a lovely place to have been and played. Even if they struggled to get in. What other cities? No, nothing's coming.
I think Italy's as good as anything. And I do need to say, Kerry, that mutual respect and love for Italy makes the guy knocking on your window from Italy slightly less weird to me now.
Well, you see, we have faded completely from their consciousness. I'm not aware of any following there now. And we very rarely got royalties from there, even though it was Rouge. Yeah. So that just shows you the corruption that's going on over there.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's just a lovely old place. Yeah. And they don't knock places down and rebuild in the 60s like we did here. Such horrific concrete nothingnesses. You know, it's a nice place to be. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
The next short, sharp one, Kerry's, name a song that you used to love, but over your career you probably played it to death and would happily never play it again.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Funny Ways. It's a song called Funny Ways. Sorry, were you waiting for me?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Funny Ways.
No, Funny Ways. No, I'm aware of Funny Ways. No, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's
probably
good answer.
Be happy not to play that one again. Yeah, but they all had their place. We needed a downtime in the set, so that's the role it often played. But
no, understood. And is there a favourite music documentary or movie, Kerry, over recent years or over your life, that a particular music documentary or movie that resonated with you?
Yes, well, Jacqueline Dupre. Have you heard of her? Yeah, she's a cellist.
No, I haven't.
She's an amazing cellist who suffered from a disease which gradually took her, and she was unable to play. And the chap who did a film of ours, Chris Newpen, I think he did a documentary on. She was going out with a chap called Daniel Barenboim, who's a conductor, German conductor and player, and they got married eventually, and but it was very moving to see. There's that one that was bless her heart. She was an amazing, a bit of a weird character, but an amazing player. It's one of those people that when she played her instrument, it was like it was part of her. That's another cliche, but she was able to express herself so readily through the instrument perfectly. And it was just a very sad story. I like sad stories, it seems.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. And the last one, Kerry, is there a favourite non-musical activity or hobby? So what do you like to do that fulfills you outside of music?
I just love walking. Yeah, walking on the hills, walking by the sea, walking. I like it. And Leslie likes it. And we just go and we meet up with people and go walking on places and chatting to friends about stuff and that kind of thing. Yeah, anywhere. Trying to get away from the masses. That's getting increasingly hard over here. We are a very crowded little island. And trying to find a little spot to yourself is not always the easiest to do.
No, it's not. But what I would say, Kerry, is that there are lots of beautiful islands you've created for people through your music. You've certainly created lots of peace and harmony and the word you use so beautifully, humility, in your own approach to music. It's certainly had a massive impact, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to chat to us today. And I'm certainly excited to see the remaster of Playing the Fool come out. I know I've got it on my pre-orders, but cannot thank you enough.
Oh, well, I hope you thoroughly enjoy it as I have. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It sounds like they're having fun.
And there we have it. As I said at the start of the show, what an honour and a privilege. And Kerry just had so many amazing insights and is just a master of his craft and humble to the point of insanity. Just loved his approach to music and just what he's done for the music industry more broadly. So thank you, Kerry, for your time. Thank you, as always, for your time. We always appreciate you listening to our interviews. If you'd like to keep in touch with us, we do love getting feedback, whether it's positive, negative feedback on the show, suggestions for future guests or so on. Please do reach out to us at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We're on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, you name it, we're on there. Just search for the Keyboard Chronicles and you'll find us. I do want to give a special shout out to our gold and silver supporters. From the sunny land of Wales, Mr. Dewi Evans, thank you, sir, for your ongoing support. The lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew, cannot thank you enough, Tammy, for your ongoing support as well. The brilliant Mike Wilcox from Midnight Mastering. If you've got work that needs mixing and or mastering, Mike is the guy. Incredibly well priced and incredibly good quality product. Cannot recommend Mike highly enough. And last but definitely not least, Dave Bryce and the team at the musicplayer.com forums. Do jump in there. What a hive of insights and interest and information and humour, you name it, all with a keyboard slant. So do consider the musicplayer.com forums. Again, thank you for listening. We'll be back in the next week or two. And in the meantime, keep on playing.